The moment I stepped into that old Victorian house, I felt something was wrong. A heaviness hung in the air, not humidity or temperature, but a pressure against the skin. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet with a slowness that felt almost deliberate, as if the house itself was taking note of my presence. I should have listened to that first instinct, the primal warning system left by ancestors. But I ignored it, chalking it up to fatigue from the long drive and the inherent unease of being in an unfamiliar place. My college friend, Mark, had invited me for a weekend getaway at his family home, a rambling two-story structure that had been in their family for generations. When he said historic home, I pictured charming antiques, maybe some slightly dated wallpaper. Not this looming structure, with its maze of narrow corridors and rooms that seemed to swallow the light. Mark apologized for putting me in the downstairs guest room instead of upstairs near his bedroom. He vaguely mentioned repairs cluttering the upper floor with furniture. I shrugged it off at the time, but now, I wish I'd insisted on a hotel. The room wasn't terrible, just small, the faded floral wallpaper peeling at the corners, heavy oak furniture looking like it hadn't moved in decades. The bed seemed comfortable enough, the fresh linens smelling of detergent rather than must. That evening, we sat on the porch drinking beers, reminiscing about college. Mark seemed tired, a haunted quality I hadn't noticed over video calls. He brushed it off, saying family business kept him busy. By midnight, we were yawning, and Mark pointed me toward the bathroom down the hall before heading upstairs himself. I lay in bed, exhausted, but sleep wouldn't come. The house made sounds, creaks, pops, but they seemed patterned, noises often occurring in threes, and sometimes there was a faint whispering like static between radio stations. Around 1 a.m., the temperature dropped sharply, abruptly, like someone had opened a freezer door next to my face. My breath plumed. I pulled the blankets to my chin, but the cold felt corporeal, pressing down on me, seeking ingress through the layers. Poor insulation, drafts, I told myself. Then the footsteps started. Faint at first, upstairs, directly above my room. Mark going to the bathroom, I thought, but the steps reached the staircase and began descending. One step at a time, cautious, slow. My entire body tensed. The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs and paused. I held my breath, heart pounding. After an interminable moment, the steps resumed, moving down the hallway toward my room. They were heavier, more deliberate than Mark's stride, with a faint drag to the left foot. Right outside my door, they stopped. Silence. Then, a soft click. Light flooded under the door as the hallway light switched on. Another click. Off, on, off. Like someone was testing the switch, or signaling. My throat closed up. I stared at the sliver of light, waiting for a shadow or fingers to appear beneath the door. Nothing. The footsteps retreated, moving back down the hall, pausing at each doorway, the on-off light sequence repeating, as if checking every room. By the time the steps faded and the house fell silent again, my sheets were damp with cold sweat. I lay awake until dawn. In the morning, I found Mark cheerfully making coffee in the kitchen as if nothing had happened. The normality of the scene made the night's events seem dreamlike. I tried to sound casual, asking if he'd come downstairs during the night. Mark paused, a flicker of confusion crossing his face, then said he'd slept soundly all night, hadn't been downstairs at all. He hadn't heard anything unusual either. When I described the footsteps and the lights, he frowned, suggesting old wiring and the house settling. Rational explanations, but his eyes held a carefully masked worry. I spent the day trying to distract myself, but my mind kept returning to the footsteps, the checking of doors, the bone-deep chill. That evening, Mark suggested a movie in the living room, subtly delaying bedtime. But eventually, exhaustion won. Around 1 a.m. again, I lay tense in bed. The house was quieter than the night before, almost deliberately so. At precisely 2 a.m., the cold returned, this time ferociously, painfully. The frigid air burned my lungs. My fingers went numb. Frost patterns began forming on the inside of the window panes. The footsteps were different this time.
No question.
They moved purposefully down the stairs, down the hall, straight to my door. No checking other rooms, no light flicking. It had found what it was looking for. My door had no lock, just an old brass knob. I watched, paralyzed with horror, as the doorknob began to turn, slowly. Metal grated against metal. The door stuck slightly in its frame. The knob turned back. A pause. Then it began turning again, more forcefully. Adrenaline shattered the paralysis. I threw myself out of bed, pressing my full weight against the door. The knob stopped turning. Then slowly, it began to turn the other way, as if testing the mechanism. A whimper escaped me. Instantly, all movement ceased. Absolute silence. Summoning every ounce of courage, I yanked the door open. The hallway was empty, but the air shimmered like heat rising from summer pavement. And the lights began to flicker. Not just one, but all of them, in perfect synchronicity. On, off, faster and faster, creating a strobe effect that made the shadows dance. Shadows that moved counter to the light, twisting into shapes that were almost human but elongated, distorted, limbs bent at impossible angles. I slammed the door shut, wedged the small room chair under the knob, backed away until I hit the wall, heart hammering violently. I sat on the bed, eyes glued to the door until dawn. The frantic flickering of the hallway light continued beneath the door. In the morning, the hallway was normal again. The lights worked perfectly. Over breakfast, I brought up the night again. This time, Mark was silent. He stared into his coffee cup for a long moment before asking if I'd actually seen anyone. When I described the shimmering air and the shadows, something like relief flickered across his face. Finally, he admitted it. Strange things had been happening in the house since his grandmother died 6 months ago. Nothing dangerous, he added quickly, just lights, footsteps, cold spots. His father had checked everything, wiring, plumbing, and found nothing. Then Mark said something that chilled me more than any ghost. His grandmother had, for decades, been the house's caretaker, maintaining certain old traditions she claimed kept the family safe. After her death, no one knew what those traditions were, or how to continue them. Mark's father dismissed it as superstition. But Mark wasn't so sure. The disturbances had started small, but were becoming harder to ignore. And the guest room I was staying in had been his grandmother's room. I packed my bags within the hour. Mark made no attempt to convince me to stay. He seemed relieved, even. As I loaded my car, he stood awkwardly on the porch. Before I left, he pressed something into my hand. A small, old brass key. "Don't keep it," he explained. "It's just for coming back if you find yourself thinking about the house too much, or feel pulled back towards it." He made it clear this wasn't a theoretical concern. It's happened before. I keep that key in my desk drawer. Sometimes late at night, I find myself standing there, just looking at it. I never touch it, but sometimes I swear it's moved. And on particularly cold nights, I wake thinking I hear footsteps in my own apartment hallway, and the rhythmic, ghostly click of a light switch turning on and off. Finding silence here, I realize, isn't peaceful at all. It's just the world holding its breath, waiting.